Wonderful.
Yeah, I just wanted to get rid of everything, then I can just crack on with it. Right, so well, good. I think I'm on that. Brilliant. I hate this bit. It's the worst bit. It's like kind of when you go over a cliff face, abseiling or something. When you get on with it, it's fine. But when it's going over so yeah, cool.
I love it. Good analogy.
Well, yeah, it was quite similar, really. Okay, we welcome today Joe Hayes, who is he has a very, very distinguished and long history of esoterical, spiritual endeavors, and I am very, very much looking forward to listening to his stories. So, welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much. And it's always nice to connect with you, Toby.
Same here. I mean, I see you at every event. I'm sure you're at a lot more events than I am. So a lot of people do know you. They see you quite often, and you do organize the odd event or help organize as well. But I've always wondered because you've got an exotic accent, your sort of history, why you're over here to start with from San Diego, and the story of how you got into all of this, really. So I remember talking to you the other day about I think it's when you were a child, you had dreams where you have out of body experiences, and I'm quite interested to understand what that was and also how you tricked it. You managed to wake up and stuff like that. Is that
Yes, I
right?
did.
Should we start there?
That sounds great. Yeah. Because, Toby, a lot of people have the similar experiences. And sometimes they don't either talk about it or they don't remember. And I'm just hoping that, my influence and what I've been through will help other people to know that we all have that something, that magic inside that we can draw on, and we just need encouragement. But my journey started. I won't start at the beginning because a filmmaker never does right at the beginning. He always comes in a little bit and then goes back. But when I was quite young, excuse me, when I was quite young, uh, I used to have nightmares for one thing. But the interesting thing is that um, it was preteen, and this goes back a long time. As a pre-teenager, I would have dreams where I would wake up at night and I would see my physical body in bed. And I would thought, you don't understand what's going on. And because I couldn't wake myself up, you panic and you scream, and then you wake yourself up that way. But I didn't understand what all that was. And it was intermittent. It didn't happen all the time, but it happened enough in my life that it influenced me to want to know what it is. What is this? Why am I experiencing this? Because the religion I grew up with, which was a Christian religion, couldn't answer it. The philosophy I studied at university didn't answer the questions why I was having these inner experiences. And as a child, when you have a nightmare, my mother used, you start screaming, and mother would come in, get in bed with me and say, I was quite young, obviously, but she would say, it's only a nightmare, it'll get better. And I thought, I don't know, there was just something else that was behind that. And it was very, very interesting. So because I often had dreams where I was being chased, and many, many people have those dreams. And it's not uncommon, but I would never look around to see what it was that was chasing me. And for those people who have had those experiences, you can't hide, you can't run. You're there, it's always there. And I thought, I don't understand what all this is all about. So what I did, because they were infrequent, but because they were meaningful, I learned how to I tried to run as fast as I could away from whatever it was. That didn't work. So I knew that my thigh muscles were stronger than my calf muscles. So I tried to run backwards, thinking that I could run faster. I still didn't see what it was. And that still didn't work. So what I did, which was quite unusual, was I got to the point where I would lay down on the curb outside the house or wherever I was running and roll off in the dream. And because I was doing that in my dream, I would roll out of bed and I'd wake myself up. And I thought, gosh, this is really extraordinary. You know, I just have to really understand more. But that carried on. And that was basically my search into the spiritual world, you know, what it is. I came from a lovely family. I grew up, my parents were Christian, and I grew up in a Christian family, and I went to church when I was young for 8 years without missing a Sunday, but there were no answers. I didn't have the core answers that I was looking for. And I think when I got much older, I asked my parents, you know, what happens when you die and you go to heaven? And, you know, I was told, well, you sing with the angels for all eternity. And I thought, well, heck with that. You know, I mean, I knew there was something much better than that, because we've survived as a human race by looking after each other and helping each other. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be of some kind of service. And growing up in so that was my young experiences that drove me to try to understand what was going on inside. And then a little bit later, still a teenager, growing up in the 60s, it was a really difficult time because so many things were happening. And people were, I think what I'm trying to say is that in the late 50s or early 60s, you had this influence of drugs and free love and all of that. And the thing that kept me out of that was my sport, because I loved surfing, and I wasn't a big guy, so I didn't do combative sports like football and soccer and things like that. I did things like surfing and tennis. Those were my two main interests. But it was the surfing that kept me, when you got bored, what do? You go to the beach and you have a barbecue and you go surfing. So it kept me out of that drug culture. And a number of my friends were just blowing themselves out on drugs. And I thought, no, there's got to be an answer. I have to know why I'm here, what my purpose is. And one thing led to another. And I can carry on with this unless you want to ask me a question or.
That's great. But you were doing the surfing, and then you became a monk, didn't you?
No. Well, oh no, I'll tell you what, that was interesting because I didn't know I had a surfing friend we were very close. We always surfed together. And I wanted to help some of the people that were on the beach. There were kids out there, and I just didn't know what to do. And one day we just thought, why don't we go on to a retreat? And north of San Diego is Encinitas. And in Encinitas is the Paramahansa Yogananda ashram there. And but it's on a cliff, and it's also a very, very important surfing spot when it breaks on a north swell, a particular swell. So my friend and I thought, well, let's go away for the weekend and see what this is all about. So when we arrived at the monastery, because we thought, don't want to, what the outside world just doesn't have to, it doesn't have anything to offer at that point. So I thought, right, well, let's go. So we talked to the head monk, and the head monk said, if you two would give as much energy to meditation and this life as you do to surfing, you'd be enlightened this lifetime. And we thought, right, that was encouraging. So Les and I, who's the guy, my friend, we stayed in the same room. We couldn't talk. We had a meditation on Friday. We had to write notes if we wanted to say something because we had to be silent. So we had a meditation on Friday. We did a meditation most of the day on Saturday, and I hadn't a clue what we were doing. I was just sitting there with my eyes closed, and I thought nothing was happening because I didn't know how to influence it or how to go within. And on Sunday morning, we got up early, and Swami's, which is the point break of the surfing break, was breaking about 8 feet, and there were perfect waves. And Les and I looked at each other, and we jumped out the window, and we spent the rest of the day surfing. And to me, that was the closest to God that I have ever been, where you are in the middle of a wave, and it's completely silent, and your toes are right on the end of the board, and you have to be so at one with the board and the wave and everything that to me that was the ultimate oneness. And I thought, if I can find that in surfing, there must be a way to look. And one day I just stood in the mirror and I said, look, I've got to know what my purpose is, why I'm here, or I just don't want to live. I have to know what I'm here for. And that was a major event because it was being brought up a Christian. I knew not the dangers of saying thy will be done, but if you say well, thy will be done, you have to listen. And but I said it with such intensity, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I got connected, and without going into any details, I wound up in England. Came over
Didn't you do stuff before that though?
Pardon?
Didn't you do stuff before that? Like you in theosophical groups?
Oh, yes.
And you went to university, didn't you?
Yes, I went to university. I studied philosophy at university. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up because I left that out.
A big chunk.
Yes, a big chunk. I went to university. I studied philosophy, and I again, it still couldn't answer the questions for me. I was working for a corporate company in America. I was working 5 days a week, and on the weekend, what do? You go surfing. I studied English literature. I studied English history. And what do you do with it? I didn't know what to do with it. So that's why when I asked that question, I thought I've got to find out what this is all about. I knew I could work, Toby. I knew I could work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, if I found my purpose. And I've been doing that for, don't ask me what it is, but I've been doing that for 57 years, literally, and with a just a joy of living. And that makes such a difference, because when you enjoy what you do and you love what you do, you've got the energy, and every day something new happens. And the synchronicities are like the high five from the universe. And you just, it's magic. It's just pure magic. So when I never thought I would leave California, because for me in Southern California, we always had an attitude. There wasn't anything else around in America that existed, because California was the be all and end all. But there was so close to Hollywood and the glamour of Hollywood that if the neighbors got a new car, you had to have a new car. And you were always living beyond your means or what other people expected of you. And I just knew there was so much more than that.
I just the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger became the governor sums it up, really, doesn't it?
I think that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It says
So
a lot.
you did a World Conference Scientific Yoga. Was it Christopher Hill's?
Yes. Well,
1970? Was that after you went to UK?
When we got to a point after I went to that monastery, I thought, I met a group of people that were, this woman ran this little group in the country. So basically, I had a house on the beach that I rented. I just gave it up and I walked out, and I lived there for a few years. And it was really meaningful because we studied. And part of my background was theosophy, which is esoteric Buddhism that was brought to the West. Rudolf Steiner, the Alice Bailey teachings, etc. And it was a really good foundation, because in that period of time, the late 50s or 60s, there were so many New Age bookshops opening up, and New Age shops in general. And you walk in and you think, there are books on yoga, and you think, where do I start? But fortunately, I met the right people that taught me the right things, and it just set my path for the rest of my life. But one thing we wanted to do was, we knew that some of the older teachers that were still alive, they wouldn't be alive much longer. So we started visiting different centers. And I'll get back to the Christopher Hills and the India experience. But one of the first ones, we traveled once up to Berkeley, California, where Krishnamurti was lecturing. Krishnamurti was the young Indian chap that the Theosophical and Alice Bailey brought out to become the next world teacher, the next expression of the Christ. And we went up to listen to him at a lecture at Berkeley. And he said some things I never forgot, but it was very meaningful. He said, you don't need books, you don't need the teachings, you don't need the masters, it's all within. Well, we knew it was all within, but how do you get there? And so it just became a search. And then one of the people that I studied with, Dane Rudyard, who was an astrologer, transpersonal astrology, quite one of the top astrologers, came down to our group and gave talks in the group, which really switched me on to astrology. And also Christopher Hills, who ran Center House in London. And he was putting on a world conference for scientific yoga to bring the scientists of the West and the yogis of the East together. And we got invited. So I wound up in India in 1970, way, I'd never traveled. And all of a sudden, here I am up in India. And then we went up to the Himalayas and Kathmandu, etc. And there were so many experiences that happened from that. But that'll have to be another story. But it just changed my life.
Was that before? Because you did like a meditation mount thing, didn't you? You're quite big on astrology, aren't you?
Yes. Well,
That
Meditation
before?
Mount, yes. Um, just off the coast of Los Angeles, there is Ojai Valley. And Ojai Valley, there's two hills, and one of them is Crotona, and the other one is Meditation Mount. And Crotona was the first commune that was built in America, and basically it was for Krishnamurti. And we used to go up there and listen, etc. But Meditation Mount, which was on the other hill, was started by it was connected to Alice Bailey, and they were just starting up the new group of world servers. And we used to drive up in an old Volkswagen bus and help them get started there. So I had a connection with both of those teachings, and they just set me, on the path that I was in. And they have morphed over the years into something new. And I always thought when I found out in my Christian religion, Christianity doesn't accept reincarnation. And I read the Bible twice, and I thought, no, there's got to be something here. And when I first realized that there was something like reincarnation, it took me 6 months not to think that I was going to some, beautiful place when I pass over.
How do you explain Jesus being reincarnated then? How do they explain that? What's the point?
Well, it was interesting because all of those times of going to church, and when Billy Graham, who was the great evangelist, came to San Diego, and my parents took me, and at the end of his talks, he has people come up and accept Jesus as your savior, and you're completely transformed. And I would never go up. I thought, well, hang on, that's just not me. And so I fought against the fundamentalism that my parents were involved in. And all of a sudden I just thought, I can't do this. And, you become the black sheep. But in a field of sheep, the black one is always the one that stands out, isn't it? So it was just the fact that my parents never, other religions didn't make any difference. It's not real. If you don't accept Jesus, the man Jesus, then you don't go to heaven. And I thought, I couldn't live by that narrow little box.
What he was saying, I'll keep this brief, but I think what he was saying when he said that, he did say, if you don't believe in Jesus, but if you don't believe in anything, you're not going to achieve what you want to do. So
no, exactly.
That's what he meant, I think, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it's just been misconstrued. Anyway, so you do a yoga thing in London as well around the same time? Is that when you came to London, or?
Yes, after when the conference finished in India, I didn't come back with the group leader because the two of us went together. She came back on her own because I thought there's something I'm missing and I want to find it. I don't know what it was. I thought when I went to India, I would meet my master, and there was just something that was missing. So when I came back to England, I studied at Christopher's Place, which was Centre House in London, and for 6 months. And that was a really, really meaningful experience. At that point, I learned more about astrology. I learned more about physiognomy, which was face reading, because some of the students there were telling me things about myself. And I said, how do you know that? And they said, well, we can read that in the face. And I thought, well, that would be, interesting. And I wanted to learn more. So I stayed there for six months. Then I went back to America, and one thing led to another. And then a few years later, I came to England.
Cool.
I know I probably left things out because there's so much there that you have to keep me on track.
I'm trying.
Okay.
It's your life, though. You know the score. Cool. So what led you to back to England? So that was the first time you went to England, was when you went to London for the yoga thing.
Yes.
Right. And then you came back. So what? Well, before we get to there, was there anything that happened when you went back in between those periods?
Well, I wasn't. Yes, the group was a bit disheartened in the fact that I didn't come back with the teacher. I let her come back on her own, and she was, obviously much older than I was. But I was bringing all of the people from the beach for classes, and we were learning a lot. But yes, I lost the thread at the moment. What brought me to England?
Yeah. So basically, you came back to England. Why was that?
Oh, I came back to England because I had met somebody who had. I was doing, when I lived in the country, I was doing some of Rudolf Steiner's biodynamic gardening. Rudolf Steiner was an anthroposophist that started the Waldorf schools. And I was working for this osteopath, planting garden, vegetables and everything. And he said, there's somebody coming from England that you might want to hear, but he was lecturing to a group of medical doctors. So I said, yes, that's fine. Anything. He knew I was interested in some of the woo-woo stuff. And I went, but it was all medicalese, and I didn't understand one word. I says, who is this guy? And I won't mention any names, but I said, who is this guy? He said, well, you might be more interested tomorrow. He's giving a lecture on out-of-body experience and astral projection. And when I went, he answered every single question that I had that nobody could answer. And that was the thing that led me to just follow this voice inside through a series of synchronicities, because we're born with the voice of the silence. But we have it weeded out by the voice of our parents, the voice of our school, the voice of our religion, the voice of our country, the voice of politics, everything. And we lose that voice of the silence. So I started listening, and I walked away with a suitcase and $500, and I had no idea what I was going to do, but I followed this voice, and it was strong enough to motivate me. And one thing led to another, and now I'm talking to Toby.
Yeah, there's one of your lectures you've done that's well, there's quite a few lectures which I've pinpointed a few. The serendipity versus synchronicity. Quite interesting, and it is quite strange when you follow your true self, when you're able to do that. It takes a bit of time.
It is.
Things just work out, don't they? And
they work out, and it's also recognizing.
Makes life so easy.
Yeah, it's recognizing a synchronicity, which I've always said are like the high five from the universe. And sometimes, when you acknowledge something, even if it's a small item like, oh, I just, it's the middle of the day, the kids are out of school, there's not going to be a parking place, and somebody moves and you've got a parking place. And I always just say, thank you very, very much. And the more you do that, the more you recognize that there is a higher self, a higher power. They give you more. And the synchronicities they happen every single day, just like the one that I mentioned before we came on that happened today. And I thought at some time I would write a book about it, but there's just so much. Don't know how to do it
Mm.
because you can't list them all.
Or remember, I forget so much stuff.
Or remember.
Yeah. So who's Douglas Baker? He's probably quite well known, but I've not heard of him personally.
Well,
He was your mentor, wasn't he?
yes, for a while.
Mm.
That's right. Yeah. I won't go down that route at the moment. If we do another one, maybe. But um, yeah, I just it was a great learning experience.
Okay.
And then I
Um,
moved down. Then I moved down to when he passed away in 2011. I moved down to uh, Southampton.
but what were you doing before that? Because it's a huge chunk of time. It's like 30 years. Where were you living? What were you working? Did you have a job? Did you have
Well,
were you
yes,
married or
up in
anything like that?
Hertfordshire, he gave about 15,000 lectures, in his lifetime.
Mm.
We lectured in, or I helped him set up lectures, helped him did some of the work on the books. Um, Lectured in 100 cities in the country. Went to Italy,
Mm.
101 times, South Africa, Australia. And it was a great education, Toby, because if you don't have that kind of travel experience, or if you don't have that kind of education, travel is amazing. You really learn, quite a bit. But I settled in England because I had a connection with England and I just felt at home. When we were in Australia and in Perth, Western Australia, it's ideal. Lovely weather, surfing was great, but I walked away from all that and I thought it's not me. It's not I'm too far from the EU. Then all of a sudden I thought, well, hang on, Joe, you're not part of the EU, you're American. So, but I just felt at home here. And then learning about various things, how I had been here before, it just made sense. And people would say, do you go on holiday? I thought, I am on holiday, I I love what I do.
Warren Bowden said that yesterday about because he's from New Zealand, obviously. Same thing basically, what you just said. He went back to home and it didn't feel like home. So,
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And I was working in a tiny little room, um, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. And people would say, well, how can you leave California and the sunshine and all that? But when you find what your heart is telling you and leading, it just makes all the difference because you just love it. Well, look how hard you work. You know, you're just a perfect example of that. When you've got a passion about something, and that passion is it morphs into something. I always when we tried to set up a group, and after the doctor died, and it just never worked for me because it was like if you have a question about something or an inspiration, bring it to the group, we'll vote on it, and we'll let you know what the answer is next week. I thought, I can't do that. I've never been part of a group. I've always wanted something that morphed, that lived, that had a life of its own. And this is why coming down here and then meeting people like you and Jackie, I mean, that was just, that's a whole different experience, and that was really, really meaningful because I came down here and I'd lived in one place for 42 years, so I was completely out of my depth. And somebody said, there's loads of groups down here you can get involved. But I thought, well, I'm not really a groupie, because I was so focused on one thing. But then somebody mentioned Jackie. So when I went on to her website and saw that she knew Joe Dispenza, who I had been with and who completely changed my life, and David Hamilton, who was a good friend. I thought, oh, I've got to meet this woman. So I, I met Jackie, and the rest is history.
Cool. And you seem to have done a lot of lectures since that time. Was that down here? You did that? So I've got a page here.
Yeah. Well, when let's see how to start this. I've always kept. I knew that, and I was taught that there are three things that are very important in life for the esoteric. You keep a spiritual diary, you study the ancient wisdom, and a service to mankind. Those are the three things. Well, the spiritual diary I had no problem with, because I kept a little diary ever since I was 8, one of those little lockup diaries. Have no idea what I put in there, but then I learned how to keep a spiritual diary and ask questions and get information. So that was all right. I always studied the ancient wisdom and metaphysics and mindfulness, etc., but it was the service of mankind. And because I had been to Italy 101 times, I knew a group there, and I just offered my, services. Would you like me to come back and give a talk? And then it's just snowballed.
What, in Italy was that?
Yes.
Oh, right, cool.
And gave some lectures around, around England.
So it's quite similar sort of subject matter, but all really different at the same time. So it's like nature's voice, the coming of divas. It's one of your things. The process of psychosynthesis,
Yes.
collapsing boundaries. Then I've said about synchronicity versus serendipity. Claregate method. Didn't you set up a trust or something? Was that what you're talking about with the group?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Which I've recently just disbanded and stepped down as director.
Oh, okay, right.
One of the things that was interesting, and stop me if I'm going off on a tangent, but one of the things, when I met David Hamilton, who is a Hay House author, and I went to a talk by him because in Italy, they had asked me to give a weekend talk on meditation. And I thought, oh, I felt so insecure, because I thought, if they asked me a question about endocrine glands or chakras, I don't know. And I went to a lecture with David Hamilton, and David Hamilton said, he talked about the brain, and he said, whatever you imagine, what you think, what you believe, it happens.
Yep.
And I thought that was really, really interesting. So
it goes back to the Jesus thing I said we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And so when I went to Italy, I thought that's really, really meaningful. I didn't try to structure it. I just went with a bit of a plan, and then just let go. And because I was with friends, it made such a difference, because they could draw it out. And it worked. It worked. Cool. It was a good learning curve.
Oh, brilliant. That's great. I didn't know you'd gone to all these foreign countries to do talks and things like that. So,
but if you ask me about something at this stage, I think, gosh, did I do what?
Yeah. Do you have any of this on recordings so people can see it anywhere? Video maybe, or audio?
No, they weren't recorded.
Oh, that's a shame.
No.
Well, at least we got this recorded. So, you must have it in notes and things like that, do you? Or did it just come out?
Oh no, I have notes.
Yeah.
And I've written a bit. The only thing I've got is just a Facebook page. But I don't really do social media that much. Yes.
I think people might be interested to learn a bit more about all of this. Maybe I could post it under the bottom, all the different things you've done here. So
Yeah, well, yes, all right.
Why not?
Okay.
um, your life has been really interesting. I mean, it's been you've gone with your heart, and as you say, you listen to your heart over the chattering. How would you recommend the average person, or not that there is such a thing, to go into that kind of endeavor?
Well, there's a technique which I was taught and I've used later in life. But first of all, keeping a spiritual diary is really meaningful. To record your dreams, to record your feelings. I mean, I had volumes. Um, but one thing, there was a one technique which I think is really, really useful. If you've got a problem with someone, or if you're at a crossroads and don't know which way to go, you write a letter. And this was a discipline that one of the philosophers used. You write a letter, you address it. So, Toby, it could be to Buddha, it could be to Jesus, the Christ, it could be to your higher self, whatever you follow. You write a letter, you date it, dear so and so, and I've got a philosopher, so I put, to my dear philosopher who's looked after me, and then I just pour myself out. And one of the techniques that they used was the fact that if you've got a difficult situation, you're at a crossroads, you don't know what to do, or you've got a difficulty with someone, you pour it out and you use all the language that you want to. It doesn't matter how filthy it is, you just pour your guts out, then you sign it, and then you burn it. And the brain doesn't know that you actually haven't resolved it. That was so meaningful. But and that was how I started initially doing it. But now sometimes if I'm at a crossroads and I'm not quite sure where to go or what to do, because especially at this particular timing in the last couple of years, you're always given two things at once. And both are equally as important. And what do? How do you, I like to keep my word. So if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so I will write a note to my philosopher. I'd say, look, I'm feeling really lost at the moment. I don't know what direction to take. I don't know. I'm just lost. I'm not a depressant, but I don't have that drive. And I sign it. And invariably, every single time, something happens during the day right after that. It's absolutely quite extraordinary, even if it's to the point that somebody sends you a cute little video clip that makes you laugh. And you think, oh, that's lovely, just to get you out of yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I need to do that rather than acting it out sometimes.
It's really, really helpful. And also because so many people are experiencing extra dimensional qualities, call them beings, call them influences, getting downloads of information, and you think, where did that come from? It's learning how to establish that to ground it and establish it and believe in it. I think so many people, and especially your listeners that are drawn to you, have downloads and have experiences, or have children that are having experiences, and we need to encourage all that.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. I mean, it's nice to have that reassurance, that we're not all crazy, and
No.
and what's happening at the moment is a really good process for not only us but the rest of the world, which is the same thing. So that's great, Joe. Really lovely story. It'd be great if we could expand on it in future with regards to your lectures, maybe your travels in Italy and abroad, with Douglas as well as yourself on your
Yeah,
own.
I'd love to.
That'd be good. There's a few pieces we missed, but we'd be here all day if we went through everything. So great talking to you, as I say. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
have a wonderful afternoon.
Yes, you too. Very, very, very grateful, Toby, to have this entanglement with you and see you so often. And it's just, it's beautiful to meet your family, your spiritual family, because we have that, don't we? With so many people, and you just know that you're connected.
Yeah.
And I just love it.
Yeah. I just wish my pet dragon was a bit more physical so I could take him for a walk.
Well, do it in your mind first.
Yeah. Anyway, have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That'll do. Lovely. That was great. I'll click the I did record it. 45 minutes. That's pretty good.